Arya Stark had already seen more death than any child ever should. Disguised as a servant girl, she worked in the dark halls of Harrenhal, the cursed castle that echoed with screams and whispers. She had been brought there as a prisoner, but no one knew who she truly was. A Stark of Winterfell, daughter of the North, and wolf-blooded to the core. She had watched Tywin Lannister every day, the powerful lion of the West sitting in the main hall, giving orders, planning battles, and drinking his fine wine. Arya served him, poured his drinks, cleaned his table, and she listened. Oh, she listened well. She heard about Robb, her brother, how Tywin planned to destroy him in the war. She clenched her teeth but kept her face blank. She had learned how to survive, but she also had something else, Jaqen Hagar. He had given her 3 lives, 3 names, 3 deaths, and she had used 2 already. The 3rd she kept, waiting, watching, thinking, every time she saw Tywin sitting there, in his armor or his fine robes, his rings shining and voice sharp. A thought crawled into her head like a spider. What if I gave his name to Jaqen? What if the mighty lion just died? One night she couldn't take it anymore. She waited until Jaqen found her in the dark hallway near the kitchens. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking but firm. "The last name. I want it to be Tywin Lannister." Jaqen looked at her with those strange eyes, like still water. For a long moment he said nothing. "That name is hard," he said at last. "Heavy, many guards, many eyes." "I don't care," Arya said. "He's the reason Robb's losing men. He's killing everyone. He's evil." Jaqen tilted his head, thoughtful. "A girl will sleep, and when she wakes, the lion may roar no more." That night Arya lay on the cold stone floor, heart beating loud in her chest. She didn't know if he could do it. Tywin was powerful. He was careful. But Jaqen had already killed 2 people like they were nothing. Maybe, just maybe, in the morning Harrenhal was in chaos. Arya heard the shouting first, then the screams. Soldiers running, bells ringing, ravens flapping from the tower. She rushed to the hall, pretending to carry water, and saw it, and Tywin Lannister, the mighty hand of the king, slumped over the table. His mouth open, eyes wide, blood soaking into his cloak. He was dead, poisoned, no wounds. No fight, just gone, Lord Tywin, killed in the heart of his own army, inside his own camp. No one saw it coming. Arya backed away, blending into the shadows. She felt it first in her chest, a wild pounding, then in her stomach, a strange twist of joy and fear. She had done it. She had changed something. Robb would be safe, maybe. The war might change. She had killed a Lannister, a big one, but that wasn't all. The Lannister camp turned mad. Some thought it was the work of the North. Others blamed the Freys, or even the Brotherhood without banners. No one trusted anyone. Fighting broke out between groups of soldiers. The officers couldn't agree on what to do. Everything Tywin had built started to fall apart, like a lion's skeleton turning to dust. Arya knew this was her chance. While everyone fought and argued, she slipped away from Harrenhal, quiet as a shadow. She didn't wait for anyone. Not hot pie, not Gendry. She just ran. Into the woods, into the world. But something had changed in her. Killing Tywin wasn't just a smart move. It felt powerful, like she had taken a piece of justice for her family. But also, like she had tasted something she wasn't sure she could spit out now. She was still a girl. But she was also becoming something else, something darker, something the Lannisters would regret ever crossing. Arya ran for 3 nights without stopping. She didn't care about the cold, the hunger, or the blisters on her feet. All she thought about was getting far, far away from Harrenhal. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Tywin's face, frozen, lifeless, lips parted like he wanted to say one last word. But he never got the chance. She told herself it was justice, that she had done the right thing. But there was a strange knot inside her chest, tight and hard. She had taken a man's life, not with her own hand, but still. It was her doing. Tywin Lannister was dead, and Arya Stark had made it happen. She found shelter in an old mill by the river, hiding under a broken wagon. Her clothes were soaked, and her stomach growled like a wolf. She chewed some hard bread she had stolen on the way and tried to sleep. But voices from her past kept echoing in her mind. "You're no killer. Stick them with the pointy end. Valar Morghulis." The wind howled outside, but inside Arya, something was even louder. The feeling that she couldn't go back to being just a little girl anymore. She had stepped into a darker path now, and there was no turning back. Meanwhile, the news of Tywin Lannister's death spread like wildfire across the kingdoms. In King's Landing, Cersei lost control. She screamed for days, accusing everyone, the Starks, the Tyrells, even her own Uncle Kevin. The small council was shaken. Without Tywin, the real power behind the throne was gone. King Joffrey, young and cruel, became even more unstable. He ordered random arrests, punishments, and even beheadings of Lannister guards who failed his grandfather. The balance of power was broken. In the north, Robb Stark received the message while setting camp near the twins. At first, he didn't believe it. "Tywin Lannister, dead, are you sure this isn't a trick?" he asked the Raven Master, but the seal was real. The writing unmistakable. Tywin had been poisoned. No suspects. No explanation. Robb didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He just stood still, eyes hard. "If he's truly dead," he said slowly, "then the lion has lost its teeth." His mother, Catelyn, looked at him. "Do you think this will help us?" "I don't know," Robb said, "but it changes everything." And it did. The Lannister army splintered. Some commanders turned on each other. Others tried to retreat west. The Freys, uncertain of who would lead now, began doubting their alliance. The Bolton men, always watching, started plotting their own move. War was shifting, and no one knew why. Back in the Riverlands, Arya kept moving. She crossed muddy roads, quiet villages, and burnt-out farms. She kept her head down and eyes open. People still saw her as just another orphan girl. But inside she felt older, sharper, stronger. One night, as she sat near a dying fire, a familiar voice startled her from the shadows. "A girl has stepped into a storm." She looked up. Jaqen Hagar stood there, calm as ever, his eyes unreadable. "You followed me?" Arya asked, not scared, just surprised. "A name was taken," he said. "A powerful one." "And now, the world trembles." Arya didn't know what to say. She thought he was gone, part of her past. Jaqen stepped closer. "The many-faced god is pleased, but also watching. When a girl takes a life with no blade, it is still a kill, and all deaths must be paid." "I gave a name," Arya said. "You offered me 3, and a girl used them well," he replied. "But such actions leave shadows, deep ones." "The game is changing, little wolf." She stared into the flames, then whispered, "Do you regret it?" Jaqen tilted his head. "Regret? No, but power has a price, and sometimes it comes back with a knife in the dark." Then he handed her something, a coin. The same kind of coin he had once given her, cold and strange in her palm. "Should you ever lose your path," he said, "remember the words." "Valar Morghulis," Arya said, almost a whisper. "Valar Dohaeris," he replied. Then he vanished into the night. Like a ghost, Arya sat alone, staring at the coin. She was no longer the girl who'd run from King's Landing, crying for her father. She was becoming something else, forged by death, guided by vengeance, and shadowed by gods she didn't understand. And somewhere in her heart, a voice whispered, "What name will I give next?" The road grew quieter, but the world grew louder. With Tywin Lannister gone, everything was falling apart across the 7 kingdoms, and Arya could feel it in the air, like the tension before a storm. Villages burned without reason. Bandits walked openly, stealing what they pleased. Every soldier was nervous, every lord suspicious. No one knew who to follow now. Arya stayed alone, slipping between the shadows. She wore a boy's cloak, a dirt-smeared tunic, and kept her face down. But her ears were sharp. She heard whispers in taverns and farmhouses. "The old lion's dead. Poisoned, they say. In his own camp. His own cupbearer did it. Maybe even his whore. Maybe it was a ghost. Maybe the North sent a witch." They had no idea. She was the ghost, the witch, the shadow in the hall, and yet something didn't feel right. She had imagined freedom after Tywin's death, safety. But now she felt more hunted than ever. Because somewhere out there, someone had noticed. It happened a week later. Arya had reached a broken-down village near the Blackwater, where a group of refugees had taken shelter in a half-burnt inn. She slipped in quietly, pretending to be another lost child. There was no food, barely any clean water. People sat in corners, coughing, mumbling to themselves. War had left nothing but bones behind. As night fell, she sat near the hearth with a group of silent travelers. One man, old and hunched, kept staring at her. "You're from Harrenhal, aren't you?" he said quietly. Arya froze. Her hand reached for the small knife at her belt. "I seen you," he continued. "With Lord Tywin, serving him wine." She said nothing. "You were just a little rat then," he said. "But rats carry poison too, don't they?" Arya stood slowly. Her heart beat hard. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said coldly. But the man only smiled. A sad, crooked smile. "Be careful, girl. The lion had cubs, and they're angry." She left that night. The next morning, that man was dead, slumped in the corner, throat slit. She hadn't done it. Someone else had. 3 days later, Arya realized she was being followed. At first, she thought it was just her mind playing tricks. A snapping twig, a shadow moving too fast. But soon she knew. There were at least 2 riders behind her. She could hear hooves now and then, the distant sound of armor shifting. She moved faster, deeper into the woods. But they followed. On the 4th night, she set a trap. She laid out her cloak on a log, shaped like a sleeping figure, and waited in the trees. They came. 2 men, black cloaks, one tall with a scar across his face, the other shorter but fast-moving. "She's smart," Scarface muttered. Changed direction again. The shorter one crouched. "She's close. I can smell her," Arya's breath caught. These weren't ordinary men. They were hunters, trained ones. Not bandits, not soldiers, assassins. She gripped her knife, heart racing. But then a voice behind her whispered, "Not now, Jaqen." He appeared without a sound, standing beside her like a shadow. "They are not for you," he said softly. "Not yet. Who are they?" she asked. "Eyes sent by Casterly Rock," Jaqen answered. "The lions do not sleep. They smell blood. They know someone was inside the den when the King of Beasts died. They think it was me. They know it was you." Arya swallowed hard. "Then why don't they just kill me?" "Because lions play before they bite." Jaqen looked into her eyes, serious now. "You can run, and run, and run, but the past has your scent. It will always find you." She was tired of running. "What do I do then?" she whispered. Jaqen pulled something from his cloak, not a coin this time, but a small mask. Smooth, white, blank, like a face made of silence. "Come with me," he said, "to Braavos. Become no one, or become something greater." Arya looked at the mask. It scared her. It thrilled her. But behind her, death was closing in. And ahead, maybe something more. "I'm not done yet," she said. "I still have names." Jaqen nodded. "Then learn to take them properly." The next morning, the assassins found nothing. No girl, no trail, just a single coin, lying on a rock. They picked it up and read the words etched faintly on its surface. "Valar Morghulis." And somewhere far across the narrow sea, a ship sailed for Braavos, carrying a wolf with a ghost in her heart and a growing list in her mind. Braavos looked nothing like Westeros. The sea smelled different here, saltier, thicker, full of fish and fog. The streets were narrow and twisted, the buildings stacked like crooked teeth. Strange masks hung from windows. The people spoke in soft voices, in tongues Arya didn't understand. Everything felt like a dream she didn't trust. She stood on the deck of the ship, watching the Titan of Braavos rise before her, that massive stone giant with fire in its eyes, guarding the city. It felt like stepping into another world, one where rules were written in silence, and death wore 1,000 faces. Jaqen was already gone when the ship docked, just like always. He had told her to follow the black and white door, the House of Black and White. She found it at the edge of the city, an old, quiet place with 2 massive doors, one painted black, the other white. No guards, no signs. Arya knocked once. The door creaked open by itself. Inside it was cold and still. A man with a pale face and dark eyes stood waiting. It wasn't Jaqen, but his eyes were the same, deep and unreadable. "Who are you?" The man asked. "I'm Arya Stark," she said without thinking. He shook his head. "Then you are not ready." And he closed the door in her face. Arya stood there, stunned. She stared at the door, then knocked again. No answer. She sat on the stone steps for 3 days. No food, no shelter, just her and the wind. She thought of giving up. Thought of stealing a boat. Thought of Jaqen and how he had brought her all this way only to leave her. On the 4th day, the door opened again. The same man looked at her. "Who are you?" he asked once more. This time she said, "No one." He stepped aside. "Then come in." Inside the house of black and white, everything felt dead. The halls were quiet, the air thick with the smell of old candles and strange herbs. Faces lined the walls, real ones taken from the dead, preserved like leather masks. They stared at her with empty eyes. The man gave her a simple room with no bed, just a mat on the floor. "No windows, no mirror. We will teach you," he said. "But first you must forget." "Forget what?" "Everything." Arya stared at him. "My name too?" "Names are a cage. You must be no one to wear many faces." The next weeks broke her in ways the road never had. They made her clean the corpses brought to the house, wash them, dress them, close their eyes. She hated it. The stink, the silence, the cold skin. But she did it, quietly. They asked her no questions, gave no comfort. Then they took needle, the only thing left of Jon Snow, of Winterfell, of Arya Stark. They told her to throw it into the canal. She walked to the water, holding the sword in both hands. She stared at the dark waves. Her heart screamed, but instead of throwing it away, she hid it under a pile of rocks near the stairs. Wrapped in old cloth, she whispered, "Not today." One night, they gave her a cup, the gift, they called it, poison. She was to give it to a sick girl crying in the temple. The girl had no family, no hope. Just pain. Arya sat beside her. The girl asked, "Will it hurt?" "No," Arya said softly. "It will be like sleeping." The girl drank. Minutes later she was gone. Peaceful, Arya washed her, dressed her and carried her body to the back room, where the faces were taken. She didn't cry, but inside, something twisted. The House of Black and White was not about kindness. It was about balance, about death, about silence and Arya. Arya was learning to become a ghost. But every night in her dreams she still saw faces, not of strangers, of her enemies, Cersei, the Mountain, Walder Frey, and even one she never thought she'd see again, Joffrey. Smiling, bleeding, laughing, the list was still there, buried beneath no one, waiting. And one night, as she knelt beside the pool in the temple, the man with the pale face whispered, "You are learning well. But you still lie to yourself." "I don't," she said. "You say you are no one, but your eyes burn with names." He handed her a mask, her first. It was soft, cold, empty. "When you wear this," he said, "you must forget Arya Stark completely." Arya held the mask. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. Outside, the water of Braavos was still. Inside, the wolf waited, and one day she would wear a face that her enemies would never expect, and when they looked into her eyes, it would be the last thing they ever saw. The mask fit like skin. It smelled like dust and memory. Arya held it in both hands, her heart pounding. She had been taught how to wear it, not just on her face, but in her bones, in her voice, in her walk. You don't just pretend to be someone else. You become them. She had watched the faceless men do it for weeks. Now it was her turn. She slipped the mask on. She was no longer Arya Stark. She was Lana, a young market girl, plain, forgettable, with brown eyes and a chipped tooth. Her hands smelled of fish. Her feet were calloused. No one would ever look twice at her, that was the point. Her first task was simple: follow a merchant suspected of lying to the house. He owed a debt, not of money, but of justice. He had taken the gift, survived, and never returned to pay. Arya watched him for days. She learned how he walked, how he scratched behind his ear when he lied, how he looked over his shoulder when he left his house. Like guilt hung around his neck. She didn't speak to him, didn't confront him. She simply slipped poison into his cup at the tea stall one afternoon, smiled at the vendor and walked away. By evening, he was found dead, eyes wide, tongue black. Another face for the hall, but Arya felt nothing, no guilt, no pride, only silence. Back at the house, the man with the pale face studied her. "You did well," he said. Arya waited, but he said no more. Another task came, then another. Each time a new mask, a new life, a young healer, a dying beggar, a mute servant girl. She played each one perfectly, but every night when she pulled off the mask, Arya Stark returned, just for a moment. And the names returned with her: Cersei Lannister, Eileen Payne, the Hound, Walder Frey. She whispered them like prayers, but they weren't prayers, they were promises. One morning, she was called into the quiet chamber where Jaqen now stood waiting. "You have learned much," he said. "You are ready to serve outside these walls." Arya's breath caught. Was this it? The mission she had been waiting for? "Where?" she asked. "Westeros." Her heart beat faster. "You will go as Cat of the Canals," Jaqen said. "To Gulltown, to listen, to see. There is a name to take, but only when the time is right." Arya nodded, but in her mind, she was already crossing the sea, already smelling the air of her old world, already hunting. Gulltown was a place of secrets. Ships came and went every day, full of whispers, of letters, of lies. Arya worked at the docks as a fishmonger's helper. She played the part well: dirty hands, loud voice, bad teeth. No one noticed her, but she noticed everything: lords' sons drunk on cheap wine, knights bribing guards, sellswords bragging about red wedding rumors. And then she heard a name: Walder Frey. One of his sons was visiting the Vale to arrange a marriage. A soft one by the sound of it, ugly, cruel, arrogant, but important. He stayed in a guarded manor by the coast. Arya followed him for 2 days, watched him beat a servant, watched him mock a crippled stable boy, and she knew this one belonged on her list. But the rules were clear: take only the name given. Do not act on your own desires. She went to the small rented room where she slept and stared at her face in the cracked mirror. It wasn't her face, it was Cat's, but behind it, Arya's eyes burned. She couldn't stop herself. That night, she slipped through the manor's back walls, using a servant's face she had taken weeks ago. She crept through the halls with quiet steps. Soft as breath, she found Walder Frey's son in his chamber, drunk and snoring. She stood over him for a long moment. Then she whispered, "The North remembers." She slid the knife across his throat. He never made a sound. She vanished before the blood cooled. Back in Bravos, Jaqen waited at the door of the house when she returned. "You were not sent for him," he said. Arya met his eyes. "I did what needed to be done. That was not your place. He was on my list." Jaqen was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Then you are not no one." Arya stepped closer, her voice steady. "I don't want to be no one." "Then who is a girl?" She didn't smile. She didn't flinch. "I am Arya Stark of Winterfell, and I have names." Jaqen studied her for a long time. Then he said, "Then you must go. The many-faced god will not use you." "Good," Arya said. "I don't serve death." She turned away from the house of black and white, mask in one hand, coin in the other, and for the first time in a long time, she felt free, not because she had escaped, but because she had chosen. The sea was wild the night Arya returned to Westeros. Waves crashed against the ship's hull like angry fists. The storm howled like a pack of wolves, but Arya didn't flinch. She stood at the bow, cloak-soaked, face calm, eyes fixed on the coast ahead, the Riverlands, her home soil. She could almost feel the weight of it under her feet, even before they docked. The smell of the trees, the damp air, the way the crows screamed above, louder than she remembered. Everything had changed. But so had she. She wasn't the girl who had run from King's Landing in terror. She wasn't the servant girl, scrubbing floors at Harrenhal. She wasn't no one. She was Arya Stark of Winterfell, and she had work to do. Her first stop was easy to find. It had been burned into her mind since the day of the Red Wedding, since her mother's scream had been silenced, since Robb's head was sewn to his wolf. The twins' House Frey. She didn't ride in with a banner. She didn't storm the gates. She arrived as a serving girl, a quiet one, pale, thin, with downcast eyes and a soft voice. Just another kitchen hand sent from a minor house to help with the coming feast. Old Walder Frey was celebrating again. Another marriage, another alliance. His halls were full of drunken men with fat bellies and sharper tongues than swords. No one paid attention to her, they never did. She served the wine, poured the ale, moved between the tables like a shadow. She watched every man's face, counted the sons, listened for their names. They laughed and shouted, bragged about battles, mocked the Starks like they were ghosts. Arya smiled behind her tray, because the food was ready. That night, she entered the main hall one final time, dressed not as a servant, but in a fresh gown, hair brushed, skin clean. The guards didn't stop her. She had already poisoned the wine one by one. They dropped, choking, gasping, eyes wide. Walder Frey sat frozen at the head of the table, wine in hand. Watching his sons die, foaming at the mouth, Arya stepped forward. He stared at her, confused. Who are you?" She pulled the mask from her face, and for the first time in years, she said her name without fear. "I am Arya Stark." Walder Frey tried to stand, but he was old and slow. She grabbed his head and forced him to look into her eyes. "You murdered my mother," she said coldly. "You murdered my brother. You didn't kill them in battle. You butchered them at a feast," she smiled faintly. "But now the feast is yours." And she slit his throat. Word spread fast after that night. Whispers ran through the riverlands like fire on dry grass. The Freys are dead, all of them. Someone killed them all at once, like magic. Some say it was the ghost of a Stark girl. Some said it was revenge. Others said it was madness, but all agreed on one thing. The North remembers Arya disappeared into the woods, riding alone, leaving nothing behind but corpses and silence. But she wasn't done. Her list wasn't finished. Cersei Lannister still sat on the Iron Throne, smug and cruel, wrapped in gold and lies. The mountains still breathed, barely human, a beast in armor. Elin Payne, the silent executioner who had killed her father. And Melisandre, the red woman with the burning eyes. They were still out there, still alive, but not for long. Arya headed north, toward the Vale, then to Winterfell, drawn not just by vengeance, but by something she hadn't felt in years, home. On the way, she passed villages still broken from war. She saw children digging graves, women begging at ruined inns, old men coughing blood. Peace had not returned to Westeros, only silence. At one stop, an old woman selling pies looked at Arya's face and said, "Are you—" Arya shook her head. "I'm no one," she said, with a smile. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. She was Arya Stark. She was the last promise of the North, and every step she took left a trail of ghosts behind her, not just the ones she killed, but the ones who had died while she ran, while she survived. The Wolf had returned to the land of lions and traitors, and this time she wasn't hiding, she was hunting, and winter, true winter, was finally here. The wind grew colder the farther north Arya rode. The riverlands gave way to frost-covered trees and hard soil. The sun barely broke through the clouds anymore, and snow dusted the ground like salt. She wrapped herself in thicker furs and kept moving, passing travelers with hollow eyes and pale faces. No one recognized her. No one ever did anymore. And maybe that was the problem. She had spent so long wearing other people's faces, so long whispering death into the ears of men who never saw her coming. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to just be herself. But Arya Stark wasn't a little girl anymore, and Winterfell wasn't a memory now. It was her destination, her only real one. She reached the outskirts of the Vale first. There, at an old inn, she heard a name she hadn't expected, Sandor Clegane, the Hound, alive. She froze when the farmer said it loud and clear over his drink. "Saw the ugly bastard myself," he said. "Big as a bear with a limp, working with some bloody brothers who build things now. Arya's hand gripped her cup tighter. She had left him to die once, bleeding under a tree. Begging for mercy, she refused to give. She thought he was long dead, but the past had a way of clawing itself back into her life, didn't it? She left the inn without a word. She found him a few days later, splitting wood beside a half-built sept in a ruined village. He'd looked older, slower, and heavier. His face was still burned, still bitter, but his eyes, they had changed. Arya didn't approach him right away. She just watched. He worked without speaking, ate without company, slept with a blade beside him. He was alive, but he wasn't really living. The hound had become something else, quieter, maybe even broken. That night Arya stepped out of the trees and stood before him. He reached for his axe out of instinct, then stopped when he saw her face. "You be," he growled, voice rough like gravel. "Me," Arya said. They stared at each other for a long time. "You came to finish it?" he asked. "You gonna kill me now?" She shook her head. "No, I came to see if you deserved it." He gave a bitter laugh. "I don't," she nodded. "Good." They sat by the fire that night in silence. No apologies, no stories, just two people who had once meant something to each other, in a world that had chewed them both up and spit them out. "You're going to Winterfell?" he asked after a while. Arya nodded. "It's time. Lot of ghosts waiting for you there. I've made peace with ghosts," he grunted. "Ghosts don't ask for peace. They ask for answers." Arya said nothing, but she knew he was right. When she finally saw Winterfell again, her heart nearly stopped. It was still standing, cold, proud, strong, but scarred. Its towers looked darker. The walls bore signs of siege. Smoke curled from the chimneys, and men patrolled the battlements in thick cloaks. The Stark banners flew once more. She hadn't seen them since before her father's head fell. She approached on foot. Cloak pulled tight, eyes on the gates. "Two guards blocked her path. State your name," one of them barked. Arya looked up at them, face expressionless. "Arya Stark, daughter of Eddard Stark. I've come home." The guards laughed at first. Then they saw her eyes and stopped. Sansa didn't recognize her at first. They stood in the cold hall, inches apart. Silent as strangers. Arya was thinner, harder, sharper. And Sansa was colder too, but not in a cruel way. In a way that said she had endured more than anyone had seen. "I thought you were dead," Sansa whispered. "I was," Arya said. "In a way." Sansa stepped forward and embraced her. The years melted just for a moment. They were two little girls again, dreaming of different lives. But now they had both lived through nightmares. "I heard what you did at the Twins," Sansa said later, over a quiet dinner. "You ended House Frey." Arya didn't deny it. "Good," Sansa said. They didn't need to say anything more. The North remembers. And now the North had its wolves back. But peace was not simple. Jon Snow was still in the south, dealing with Daenerys Targaryen and her dragons. Winter was falling harder every day, and in the shadows, news came that Cersei Lannister had refused to kneel. Arya's list was not done, not yet. But now, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. She was home, and home was worth fighting for. Winterfell was quiet at dawn. The snow blanketed everything. Soft, pure and silent, but under it the earth held too much blood. Arya stood on the battlements, wrapped in her cloak, watching the snow fall like ashes. Her fingers curled around the stone wall. Her breath came in fogged puffs. She should have felt at peace. She was home. Sansa ruled wisely. The North had begun to heal. And Jon, now called king in the North by some, had returned older and wearier. But still her brother beneath all the armor and scars. But peace wasn't made for girls like Arya, because her list still whispered to her at night. Names, like ghosts in her ear. Cersei Lannister, Gregor Clegane, Eileen. Pain, Melisandre. All still breathing, all still walking this world like justice had never touched them. And it wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about finishing the story, closing the wound, and maybe letting the wolf inside her finally rest. Jon found her in the crypts that evening. He stood beside her at Ned Stark's statue. His face looked older now, sharper. "You don't sleep much," he said. "Too many dreams," she replied. "The bad kind, the remembering kind." They stood in silence. Then Arya spoke, her voice low. "I'm going to King's Landing." Jon didn't react at first, just stared at the stone face of their father. "You're going for her," he said. "Yes, she's surrounded by guards, by armies, by a dragon queen and her soldiers. If you go, you might not come back. I've lived through worse." Jon turned to her then. "You came home, Arya? You found us again? You survived everything. Why go back into the fire?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Because she's still breathing," and that was enough. Jon didn't argue. He just placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't become what you hate," he said quietly. Arya rode alone. South, through the snow-covered roads, past half-frozen rivers, burnt villages, broken castles. War had touched every inch of Westeros. The land was tired. So was she, but her eyes never lost their fire. She arrived at King's Landing just as the golden banners waved above the gates. Cersei still sat on the Iron Throne, still played her games with fire and blood. Arya entered the city not as herself, but as a healer, face changed, voice softer. The same tricks she'd used 100 times before. The same mask, the same patience. She watched, waited, learned Cersei's movements, her guard's patterns, the way she clutched her wine cup tighter than her crown. And then she found her chance. The Red Keep was nearly empty that night. Daenerys had taken her armies outside the city walls, preparing for final surrender. The people were restless, the soldiers drunk. The lions inside the castle trusted no one, not even each other. Arya slipped in as a handmaiden. Cersei sat alone in her chamber, staring out over the city, wine in hand, armor of silk and fear wrapped around her. She didn't see Arya until it was too late. "You," Cersei gasped. Stumbling back, Arya pulled the mask from her face. "You always thought you were untouchable," she said. "Even when your children died, even when your father bled, you thought the world would always kneel." Cersei's eyes flashed, cornered and proud. "You don't get to judge me. You think killing me will fix anything? The world's still broken. You're just a girl with a knife." Arya stepped forward, calm as snow. "No," she said. "I'm the last thing you'll ever see." Cersei reached for something, a bell maybe, or a hidden blade. Arya struck fast, swift, silent. A red flower bloomed on the queen's throat. She fell to her knees, gasping, hands to her neck. Eyes wide, but Arya just watched, cold, unflinching. She left the Red Keep through the same path she came. By dawn, the city was in chaos. Rumors flew. The queen is dead. Some say it was poison. Others say a ghost came for her. But no one knew the truth. No one ever did. Arya vanished into the wind. Weeks later, she stood once again at the gates of Winterfell. Snowflakes danced around her. Sansa greeted her with tired eyes. "You did it," she said. Arya only nodded. "Was it worth it?" Arya looked out at the horizon. "I don't know." That night, she returned to the Godswood. She sat beneath the heart tree, needle in her lap, list in her hand. The names were all crossed off. Everyone. The page was stained with old blood and tears she never cried. She stared at it for a long time. Then she burned it, watched it curl, blacken and drift into the wind. The wolf had hunted. The names were gone, and Arya Stark of Winterfell finally breathed, not like a killer, not like a ghost, but like a girl who had survived everything the world threw at her and came home, alive, free, and no one's shadow but her own.